Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Morris, and I'd like to welcome you today to the ABPMP webinar series. Today we'll be talking about collaboration, and this webinar is really based on a workshop that I gave at the PEX conference last month in Orlando. Couple little notes on housekeeping first, and that is first of all, in the past we've had one webinar a month, basically on the third Wednesday of the month. Next month we're going to start giving two webinars. The webinars have been popular. We're going to have one of the webinars be more educational, as these have been, and then the second webinar to really talk more about association business, association news, to keep everybody more up to speed on what's been going on within the association itself. Now, the format that we follow is that we'll walk through the slides and have a presentation, and then at the end we'll address any questions that may come up. The webinar is basically an hour long, and if we run over from a question standpoint, we'll continue to stay on the line addressing questions for as long as people really have to spend with us. Now, the other side of that is that if we don't get to one of your questions or you think of something later, please just send us a note. We'll be happy to get back to you and answer those questions. At the end of the formal presentation, there'll be contact information that will help you get information to us. Once we've gone through the presentation today, it takes about 3-4 days, but each of the webinars that we've given will be placed on the website. We've got about 2 years worth of them out there now, so it's starting to become a fairly robust source of training information for people. Moving on along here. A little bit about me for those of you who haven't heard me on the webinar series before. I'm my name is Dan Morris, a certified business process professional, as well as a certified business architect. I've written 5 books now. You can see them on the right-hand side. And I also write papers, and I'm a columnist for PEX. I'm one of the older guys. I have over 30 years of experience in doing this stuff. And I've been involved in the industry really since it started back in the late 80s, early 90s, before it really coalesced into BPM. I'm a managing principal with a consulting firm, Wendon Consulting. I've led practices in a lot of different areas, and I've also been involved in business transformations, both very large scale as well as small scale, in a variety of companies and a variety of industries. The one thing I'd like to note is my 5th book is coming out next month, for those of you who may be interested in it. It's a little bit different of a look at it. It's really meant to help people who are collaborating on projects. And it's to do that, we'll talk a little bit more about that and talk a little bit maybe more about the book at the end of the session. Today the session is going to be divided into 3 basic sections. We'll talk a little bit about what collaboration is, why it's important, and then how do we make it happen. So first of all, what is collaboration? Well, it's certainly not the cartoon on the right-hand side, which is all too often true. But when we start to really look at history, what we find is that traditionally we see that project teams have pretty much operated in what we'll call a bubble. They've been fairly insular, and without broad-based collaboration, it's given us a lot of mixed results. Project failures, if you define a project failure as over time, over budget, reduced scope, then the estimates that we have from a thing called the chaos report runs project failures, given that definition, as high as 80%. Now, certainly, eventually, a great part of that 80% will deliver results and will deliver useful solutions. But they may be over budget, they may be over time, or they may have to reduce the scope of what was done. Part of the reason for that we're finding is a lack of real understanding of what's going on within the business areas that the projects are involved in. So that's really the second picture, which is collaboration. And what we've learned is that designing any type of solution without broad-based collaboration can provide unpleasant endings. And that's been common now. It was common in IT services, and it's now becoming common in mid to larger scale BPM efforts. So we've been looking at how do we change that? How do we fix that? What can we do? And first of all, one of the things that we find is that most business transformation projects have a heavy IT component in them. Certainly not 100%, but most of them. The problem that we have, especially with BPMS and with those that are driven by the installation of something like an ERP, is that too often they're starting to be looked at as IT projects. And the problem there is that when you approach these as an IT project, IT in as opposed to business out to IT, what you have is a very different perspective. And that perspective really is, how do I use this technology? I've got the technology, so how do I use that now to solve a problem or to do something? As opposed to with the business, here's what I want to do, here's what I want to solve, here's what I want to deliver. Now, what types of technology can I leverage for that? What type of legacy systems do I have? So it's an entirely different perspective. And we're finding that we now need to shift back to a business perspective. There are a lot of reasons that this has happened, but the bottom line is that it has happened again. It's one of the things that has caused a lot of troubles in the past, and we now are recognizing that trend again. So we need to start to take action to get rid of that. And again, one of the main things that we feel is appropriate to shift to a business perspective is that broad-based collaboration. Now, when we start to look at what that really means, first of all, collaboration today has evolved as a concept. It's not simply talking to someone any longer. Collaboration really today looks at establishing a working group from multiple business areas that may be affected by a solution, maybe not even directly involved, but affected by it, and pulling those together into a working group with common goals, sharing common information about their backgrounds, about their organizations, looking at the potential impact of different solution options, not only directly in those business areas that have sponsored the new project, but also in those business areas that are going to be affected by it. So we're now looking at those that are going to be, we'll say, sponsoring and participating directly in the solution, as well as those will now be affected by what that solution is going to do and the ripple effect of that solution on the other parts of the business. In doing that, though, we are now running into something that we really haven't had to deal with that much in the past. So it's kind of changing the ground rules. First of all, it becomes now the thread that ties the business operation to BPM. Because you can look at process, you can do these things in a sterile way, which is to send a team in to do the modeling, to do a few interviews, to do that type of thing, and come back and say, okay, now we know, and we're going to put a solution together, which is a modified version of the way that IT used to do it. Today, what we're finding out is that we are actually getting much more of a partnering, and that partnering is starting to look at going beyond even embedding a business person into the project and really looking at that business operation, getting a lot of people in that business operation involved right from the front in the current state or as is modeling right through the solution redesign and then the solution deployment. The thing that we find, though, especially as we start to deal with larger projects today, is that we're pulling together groups of people with a diverse background from different areas of the business, from different areas of IT, from BPM, BPMS, possibly vendors, possibly customers. So the types of groups that we're building in order to have successful outcomes is changing. And with that comes challenges relative to melding all these different approaches, concepts, methods, disciplines together, because of course everybody believes that their way is the only way and the best way. But the fact is that we're now, and we'll talk about this concept called orchestration in a little while, but what we're finding is a need to start listening to people with these different backgrounds, with these different methods, these different approaches and techniques, and look at how we can blend them all together so that in a composite way we now have an ability to leverage what everybody's strengths are. Now, to do this, it certainly requires a commitment on the part of management. And IT needs to learn to play nice with the business needs to play nice with IT. In a lot of companies, that's not true. There's a wall between the two groups. So what we're doing with collaboration is trying to break down that wall, break down those barriers, and not only between a given business unit and IT, but between different business units themselves. So it's an opening of communication that is at a level that we really haven't seen very often in the past. We now need to also, though, as we start to extend the team out into other areas, we run into another problem with competing, we'll say priorities, and competing requests for people's time and work and budgets. And so with collaboration, we now have to deal with commitment and the delivery or fulfillment of those commitments. And so the way that we look at governance now also has to start to change. And the way that you then would look at project planning and project status, project management, also now takes on a different view of collaboration and how everybody ties into the projects. Now, one of the things that is difficult is, you know, toward the bottom of the slide, you'll see flexibility to compromise. That's a difficult thing. You know, everybody is looking to, rightfully so, get what they need out of any project. Well, at times those things conflict. And at times priorities into what's important in a project, and if you have to give something up, what are you going to give up? Those things can conflict. So the need now to reach consensus and the ability to manage these groups takes on a different aspect, a different framework. That's why we say that collaboration is really a team sport. It's something that it will focus right down on the third bullet, and there's no room in the collaborative team for know-it-alls, for the arrogant of the world, or for the bullies of the world. You know, condescending diatribes are, you know, people can launch into things and just kind of bully their way through, and that becomes a new project management and meeting management issue. When you have multiple user managers, and this just really isn't confined to the team. When you're in meetings where you're talking at the process level and you have multiple business unit managers involved, we can have everything going on at that level too, where people, again, rightfully so, are looking to maximize the benefit that their area gets out of the overall solution. So there's a competition that we see happening when we start to look at the process level, as opposed to lower levels where it's all contained within one manager's essentially sphere of influence. Now, one of the things that we find in collaboration as we start to look at moving across different companies and different divisions in companies is that the English language is, and I imagine all languages, are imprecise. And, you know, all we have to do is to look at a dictionary, and I like Webster's, I grew up with it, but if you look at a dictionary, and for most terms, you'll have multiple definitions, which makes the use of that word contextually bound. So within the context of its use, you're supposed to figure out what it means. Well, you know, everybody uses words a little differently. Everybody subscribes a little bit different meaning to those words. When you are looking at different specialty areas within companies, different disciplines, people look at those terms even a little differently. And so what we have to do now in groups is to take the time to define for that project or for the company what those terms mean. And they can be common terms, and the dictionary will evolve and will grow over time. But you really do need to consider creating project dictionaries, simply because you would like people to really understand what one another is saying, which is the red bullet at the bottom of the slide. Now, the other thing that we find in dealing with collaborative teams now in collaborative environments is that any project team will be talking to people at multiple levels in the company, recognizing that each of those levels in the companies will be interested in different things, talk a little bit different language, and focus on we have different perspectives, different filters on what they think things should be like within the organization. So you're going to need to talk to different people in different ways. Some people have grown fairly competent at that, but a lot of people haven't really had to do it in the past. And there is a difference between the way that you would talk to a senior officer and the way that you would talk to a department manager or department staff member. They are interested in different things. And so in any type of presentation, any type of interview, you need to tailor that to the audience and the people you're going to be talking to, which now, interestingly, kind of fragments the information that you're going to be getting and the way that you're going to be sharing that information with different people. So the team has to be able to take that information and aggregate it from all these disparate sources and pull it together in a way that now can be, it's like a big puzzle. And when you put that puzzle together now, you start to develop a composite picture from the top to the bottom from the strategy side and dealing with senior officers right down to the tactical side and dealing with the people on the floor. And putting that whole picture together gives you a different insight into the type of things that are important in the solution than you may have had in the past. And I know most different than most teams that I've been involved with have had in the past. Now, why is this all important? I mean, is it a big deal, or is it, just the latest fad? I think personally, I believe that this is very important. It's one of the key tenets of BPM. If you look at BPM and you look at especially you look at the BPMS products, one of the things that the vendors have been saying for a long time now is that the way that the tools are built will support a high level of collaboration. And it wasn't until a few years into this that really started to make sense to me and to others that I know, but maybe we're just a little slow. But the fact is that the real difference is not in the ability for two people to talk to each other. The difference is in the ability of people who share a common interest to work together and share their knowledge and share their approaches so that you can together build something that is, it's the sum of the parts that hit, or let's see, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, I guess is the way we could say that. But it's a type of thing where, especially now with globalization, or especially with digital mobility, the groups that are going to be using something are much broader than they've been in the past. And so we need to be aware of the requirements for those things, the limitations, the constraints that we have, and whether we need totally different solutions in different areas, dealing with the same type of activity, or whether we can essentially version it. So there are a lot of different things that collaboration will now help us do that we've been able to ignore in the past, that we can't ignore today. The other thing that it really helps with is, and this is going down to the fourth bullet on the slide, is looking at innovation and creativity. When you broaden the base, when you look at people from dealing with the same types of issues from multiple areas, you get different perspectives and you get a broadening of ideas, which in many, many cases, especially if the company has a culture that's relatively open to creativity, you can now start to have different types of solutions. Now, one of the things, and I say in a lot of my speaking engagements, I do get some pushback on, but is that, lower level small projects, improvement projects are very different than transformation level projects. One of the things that improvement projects, whether they're Six Sigma oriented or not, is trying to take something that exists and optimize it to make it work better. Not asking the fundamental question, do we need to do this at all? Or what parts of this do we really need to do? Or how has this really changed based on changing technologies or changing needs in the company? When we start to get higher, at that level, collaboration really is not, it's important, but not as important. When we start to get to larger projects, where we start to now have an opportunity to fundamentally look at process, to fundamentally look at the way things are done, tie that into strategy and strategic execution, we now come up with a very different thing. And as we're starting to appreciate this larger picture of the company, on the triangle that we see there, okay, is I think a real good graphic for how collaboration really fits into the whole BPM concept. Because when you start to look at application generate, first of all, on the right side, redesign, which is transformation. Well, one of the key things is you can either generate applications, you can buy applications, you can deal with legacy applications, but anytime you deal with the application side, that's that lower left-hand box. The whole way that we need to now start to look at outcome deals with performance management. And how does that outcome evolve? If we're going to transform the organization, How are we really going to do that, or is what we're measuring the right thing? Are we measuring those things in the right way? How is that all evolving? The key to that whole thing, the thing that ties everything together, is collaboration amongst people with different backgrounds and different groups, looking for common patterns, looking for common issues, common problems, so that we can take and pull those things together and look at ROI, look at project requesting in a very different way. When we can find similar problems in multiple areas that we can solve with a single solution, the benefit to the company from us doing that, the probability of us doing that, succeeding in doing that, getting the right budget, getting the appropriate number of people, the appropriate scope, becomes much greater than if we looked at them individually. So collaboration, to me, is one of the key underlying tenets of BPM, because it's one of the things that really makes the way that we have approached projects in the past, this broadening, makes it so much different. And that's something that, you know, for a lot of people may not be readily apparent, but I think what I'd urge is for everybody to think about that, think about the things that I'm saying, and think about the impact of these things on the projects in your organization and how collaboration can really make a difference. Now, when we do that, we now are essentially, to coin an old phrase, we're herding cats. And I like to say, well, we're actually herding bats, because it's three-dimensional now, and it's even more of a problem, because the bats can fly away or run away. They can, you know, do a lot of different things to you. When you have people in all these different areas now that are bringing these different backgrounds, that are dealing with different priorities with their managers, that are looking for different advantages, different, we'll say, improvements out of a solution that they may only be tangentially part of. How do you pull this together? And one of the things that we see at this point is that the nature of projects changes from a staffing standpoint, because you'll be bringing experts in for short periods of time, and then they roll out. And then you bring them back, other people back in. So there's this changing of staff. Now, you'll have your core staff, but from a collaborative standpoint, you don't need the same people with the same skills throughout the whole project. What you need are specialties at different points of the project. So orchestration becomes a key part of looking at project planning, project design, and project management. And it's one of the big problems in collaboration, because, you know, when you have a year-long project or a 6-month project, up front you're saying, okay, I need these guys here because they have these skills, I need these guys, and I need these guys, so you now have your collaborative team. Well, you might not need that person for 4 months. It's quite possible that that person's manager, when you need him, will have found something else for him to do. So politically, there now is introduced this whole political component that is at a greater level than we've ever had before, because we don't want to get everybody mad, but at the same point in time, we do need to have people live up to their commitments. So politically, it takes on projects take on a very different form than they have in the past. Looking at the types of skills, the types of things that you may want to meld in, becomes a different type of a skill set that project managers will need to evolve and become experts in. The other thing that is something new for a lot of people is actually listening to new ideas and being open to others' techniques and to others' disciplines, and looking at not insularly within your own discipline, but looking at, you know, here are the weaknesses in Six Sigma, here are the weaknesses in Agile. So where can I get something to shore up those weaknesses and start to pull that all together? a lot of people have a difficult time in really listening because listening is always done through filters. And whether the filters could be, I don't like that person, so I'm just going to ignore them, not hear what they have to say. I don't agree with that discipline. And the list of filters goes on and on and on and on. And what we have to try to do now with this broadening of involvement is to try to identify those filters in us and other people and try to deal with them and try to essentially open our minds and open our ears to what others really have to say as part of this orchestration. So, are you ready for collaboration? And the fact is, cultural flexibility is really a foundation element. A lot of companies, frankly, just don't have the cultural flexibility. They don't have the will to be collaborative. A lot of companies, that's IT's job, and the business guys don't deal with it at all, to their chagrin and to their disappointment ultimately. But if you are not telling people in a way that they can understand, pulling together requirements in a way that everybody can buy into, and if you're not looking at it at performance evaluation in a way that everybody who participates in it and is going to be managed by it agrees with, you are setting yourself up for problems and possibly failure. What collaboration does is it gives you the ability to remove those things that essentially help set projects up to fail. But it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do because we're dealing with people. And anytime you deal with a machine, you're dealing with the machine, and the machine does the same thing the same way every time. People, because of these filters, will do different things in different ways each time. And so that's one of the things that makes communication so difficult. It's one of the things that makes collaboration so difficult. But it's also one of the things that makes collaboration so important. Now, when we look at things like optimization, that I will guarantee you, if you go into a room with 5 executives and you ask them to write down what optimization means to them, you're going to get at least 4 different answers. So now, in collaboration and getting ready for collaboration, what we need is an openness to start to take these terms, to take even common terms, and start to define them in a way that everybody will agree to who's on the project. And eventually that can expand out. But we need to come to consistency. And we need to use that consistency and this expansion of involvement to eliminate complacency and eliminate, we would like people to want to be involved as opposed to having to be involved in something. We'll talk just a little bit about methodology, but I would like everybody to conclusion that it's worth doing. Collaboration is something that will help you succeed. And this is a little cartoon about helping succeed. Communication, as we've been talking about, concepts, ideas, one guy may look at it one way, the other guy may look at it the other way, and ultimately the guy on the right's the guy who has to use it. So we don't want the project team, the guys on the left, to wind up with something that you spend a lot of time on, a lot of money, a lot of hours on, late nights, only to deliver something that is perfect, but can't be used. So starting a collaboration program, let me check on how I am here on time. Okay, I'm running pretty good. Starting a collaboration program is something that if you don't have a formal BPM group or a formal business architecture group, you need to find sponsors. And you'll need to find people who are open to this new way of approaching things. You know, certainly projects with, you know, IT developers on it, a couple of BPM analysts, business analysts, process analysts, and a resident user are typical and have been the way that things have operated for years and years and years. But now, as we have the ability to tie people in through the technologies, to tie them in from multiple geographic locations and leverage the ideas and the concepts and just start making it happen. That's really not recommended unless you have the foundation in place. At that point, if you've already put that foundation in place, then that's great, go for it. We find, though, that few places really have that type of a foundation. Most organizations have cut staff so much that everybody is just so busy that they don't want to become involved in anything that they don't absolutely have to be involved in, which makes it tough to put together a collaboration program and to change a culture to one where collaboration is the norm. So the first thing in looking at choice 2, adoption of a collaboration approach, is, you know, to assess your collaboration capability today. Our people, you know, our managers, essentially, one of the real questions is, you know, are business managers willing to put forth the time and the investment to make sure that any solution, any change that affects their area is going to have a positive effect on it? A lot of managers are still under the old way of doing things, which is, you know, I'll tell you what I want and then go away and do it and bring it back to me, which has a high failure rate. So, you know, one of the things is there an openness now for them to be involved, for their people to be involved? Is there an openness for people to listen to one another? Is there an ability to, within the context of IT, within the context of the way business projects are done, to modify that and build a collaborative strategy into the fabric and the fundamental way that projects are approached? And then, you know, is anyone open to really creating a formal type of plan, a formal approach for governance to make sure that whether you use Agile, whether you use ITIL, whatever you use on the IT side, and whatever methodologies you use on the business side, to modify those methodologies, to make sure that those methodologies now work together? Because, you know, in a minute we'll talk about methodologies, but, you know, everything has to now integrate with each other to support collaboration, because it's going to be supporting different ideas, different methods, different approaches, and it's going to be pulling them all together into a common environment. So is there the aptitude, or is there the appetite, I should say, for that to happen? Is management interested enough in success on a consistent and continuing basis to start to look at changing the way that things are done? Now, this one we've already talked about, actually, so I'm going to skip this one. And I think I'm going to, one of the things, well, we're talking here about collaboration controlling ripple, and I've already touched on that, so I'd rather spend the time down here on methodology. Certainly, these slides are going to be on the ABPMP website for members to take a look at it at your convenience. So they'll be there, and as you go through this, please, if there's any questions, just give me a call in the future. But what we see now is with collaboration, and we start to blend the things that we've been talking about. You need to have a new type of methodology and a new type of, potentially a new type of group, and I look at this as the BPM COE. But you need to have an orchestration group. Now, if you look at the flower on the right-hand side, the center of it is orchestration. The methodology that provides that orchestration has to blend in things like, starting from the top, business on the far left side, business architecture, intelligent BPM, which we'll be talking about that in one of the webinars, but it's a tremendous improvement over regular BPM and BPMS. Excuse me. PMO or BPM Center of Excellence, and the standards and the approaches that they try to make consistent across the company. Enterprise architecture, IT applications, BPMS, and the developers and the concepts that go along with BPMS. Lean, Six Sigma, and then change management. And there are others. So at different points in the project, the orchestration needs to now start to tie these all together. The methodology really then becomes a blending of two types. Agile, which is kind of free form within rules and within guidelines, but everybody has their own way of looking at Agile on the IT side. On the business side, waterfall. So you have structure. One of the big differences is the degree of structure that you have. So when you start to blend those two together, that's not all you're doing. With under waterfall, you're blending in business architecture, you're blending in change management, you're blending in different enterprise architecture concepts. Under the Agile concept, you're pulling in BPMS, you're pulling in IT applications, legacy applications, other IT development, you're pulling under ABPM. So you're pulling all these things together into this common framework. And there are only a couple of these things that exist in the marketplace today. And what I would urge you to do is to look at the way that it's approached within your organization and start to blend these things, start to pull them together. And when you start to do that, you'll find that the control and the governance issues are really part of the orchestration center. In doing this, one of the things that it will do is it controls collaboration, promotes collaboration. Because as you're using these different things at different points in the project, it's telling you the types of things, types of information that you need, the way that that information needs to be consolidated and cataloged with other information. And overall, it starts to let everybody move to the same page, which is extremely important when you start to look at how the operation is going to change, and you start to look for people to sponsor that change within their own organizations, because any type of change can be either resisted or it can be embraced. And what we want to do with collaboration is to move from the resistance, where you're essentially doing things to people, to a situation where people will embrace change, where they'll own that change because they're part of it. And that's what the collaboration will really give you. And ultimately that comes down to when everybody really understands what's going on, the implications of what's going on, other types of changes, whether they're regulatory changes, they're opportunity changes, can in a much quicker manner be considered, the change evaluated, and then the operation redesigned. And it comes again to the fact that the more people who really understand what's going on, and not just, well, I take this piece of paper, I look at X, I make this decision, then I pass it on. As people understand what they're doing and how what they're doing affects others and how it affects the ultimate delivery of whatever's coming out of their part of the organization, they can engage with change in a different way and in a much more collaborative way. The final thing that I'd like to talk about today are really kind of the roles, defining the jobs that we are going to be looking for in different collaborative teams. And certainly it's not on the top because it was just randomly placed there. The most important thing is the business SME. They're the ones who are going to be affected by the change. They're the ones that are going to have to approve the change. And ultimately, they're the ones who are going to be evaluated based on the changed business operation. We have process architects that are going to need to be involved, especially, you don't need a process architect involved if it's, a low-level change. But when you start to deal with anything that's cross-organizational, cross-functional, you really need to, at that point, you're dealing with either a whole process or a sub-process. And you need to understand the impact at the process level of what you're going to be doing. Process analysis, you need business architects because larger projects will have a strategic impact. They may be part of a strategy execution, or they may be part of delivering a strategic goal. But you're really going to need to consider them when you start to get to the larger types of projects. Down through the administrator, developer, on the IT side, data architect, project managers become different, as we said, because they now need to orchestrate. So you're not just managing the project anymore as much as you're now looking at orchestrating how people move in and out of that project, how people interact with that project, and the politics now that go along with collaboration. And one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is the customer becoming involved in the solution. This is especially happening now with the whole customer experience focus that a lot of companies have. So there are focus groups, there are different things that are happening right now, but the feedback from these people really is part of collaboration because it impacts the design, it impacts the direction, and it impacts the content of the solution. So at that again, keep a lookout for my new book. Hopefully you'll find it helpful. It's essentially about 850 hints that are organized the way a project is done so that your collaborative teams can get into the book focusing on a few pages that deal with the tasks that they're doing now, pull everybody together for a common way of looking at that, and then get out of the book. So it's not meant to be read from cover to cover. And it's not really a reference book as much as it is hints on when you're doing a certain activity. With that, I should throw it open to questions.
Okay, it looks like we have one right now, but I'm sure we'll have some more as people type them in. The first question is, do you think that linking BPM and knowledge management could help in collaboration? For KM has a big focus on share and capture knowledge, and this is a lot about listening and understanding people.
And the answer is yes, definitely. You know, when you start to look at, you know, defining what knowledge really is, knowledge is information that is applied through some filter so that it can be executed upon. And you know, I think they're very much you know, complement one another.
Okay, I haven't seen any more questions yet, but we can give it just a, oh, here we go. Have you seen in any company a role that united both, like a process and knowledge management specialist?
No, I haven't. But again, you know, I see a lot of companies, but in the whole scheme of things, I see, you know, a small percentage of 1% of all the companies out there. I'm not aware of where that's been done, though. That might be something that, you know, put a question like that out on the ABPMP LinkedIn website, and it's quite possible that some center of excellence, some BPM group, may have experience with that.
Okay, we can give it just another minute for questions here. Someone said, thank you very much for the webinar. How common are BPM roles in organization?
Actually, very common. The we're seeing a lot of organizations kind of blend in. We'll call it a BPM center of excellence. They'll blend in some Six Sigma people. They'll blend in possibly some business architects, some process architects. But there are a lot of different names, but most organizations today will have some type of a BPM leading change in those organizations. So I'd put it at this point very common.
On your last screen, there are quite a few roles listed for defining jobs from your experience. Do companies have this level of specialization, or is it more than likely the roles will be combined?
The answer is it depends on the company. You know, we're starting to see, as an example, I put that screen back up. We're starting to see a differentiation in the process ranks from process analyst up through process architect and even to senior process architects now. That's taking a different path than the business analyst and the business architect, which the business architect becomes focused on more conceptual things like strategy execution over time, so they're typically in different groups, although there are some overlaps. So we have the business analyst dealing more on the conceptual, the process guys dealing more on the physical, but we do see those roles, not as often together as I'd like, but we do see those roles. And then the BPMS administrator has a technical role down with the developer. So if you have a BPMS tool, you would typically have somebody who is looking at how that tool is used and deals with the data administration, deals with the rules engine, deals with a lot of things like that. And then down in the BPM developer, that's the person who actually puts in the BPMN coding so that you can generate applications. Most companies have data architects dealing with their database. So I'd say that I'm seeing all of these, not all in one organization, but I am seeing all of these roles in a great many companies that I go into.
Okay. In your experience, is there a point of oversaturation on collaboration? When are there too many chefs in the kitchen?
The answer is yep. You can certainly get there. I look at it as there's too many chefs in the kitchen when you can't control the conversation. When you know, and when that happens, what I suggest is that you divide the solution, and you have a person who is responsible for the overall solution. But collaboration is a good thing, and you want it, but you have to control it. Otherwise, it just turns into chaos. So yes, there can be too many cooks in the kitchen, but then you start to look at how do I group these people, and then how can I use them in the most advantageous way to focus in their areas. So recognizing that you do need still some overlap so that you have some cross-pollination of ideas and looking for problem identification. But it becomes an issue of just dividing the team appropriately.
Defining a common lexicon across business and technology gets more challenging as the scope of collaboration expands. Have you succeeded, or how have you succeeded in this definition?
The way that I typically do it is we'll start off with like 10 or 15 common terms, and we'll send them out in an email, and you say, we're going to have a workshop on Tuesday, whatever, and please define these terms. And what people don't think anything of it typically, and they come in, and you now go around the room and you say, okay, I want to see how many definitions we have for the word process. If you look in the BPM incubators dictionary for BPM terms, last time I looked, there were like 14 definitions for the word process. So what you're doing by this exercise that I'm talking about is you're showing people that the definitions are different. And so if you take terms that you think may cause you trouble, and then do that with, you can at that point prove that you're going to have to start to consolidate and formally define some of those terms. That's worked well for me in the past.
What ideally comes first, a BPM COE or a BPMS?
I like the BPM COE. The tech guys tell me I'm crazy and they want the BPMS. The fact is that you can only go so far with BPM without a BPMS because you can't hit speed of change. You can certainly build everything that I would define in BPM. I can build it in Java or .NET or something else. And sometimes I can buy systems to put and take care of things. But I can never hit flexibility, and I can never hit speed of change without a BPMS. And any application I buy, I am tied into their maintenance schedule and their willingness to make changes to that to suit my needs. So I'm limited there. When I deal with legacy systems, I'm now still limited because of the spaghetti code that most of them have in it. So the one way that I have to hit speed is to take the models that I have to create anyway. And once I've gone through simulation and I know the design is sound, I know it's solid because the simulator told me it's solid, I can now then generate the applications, and I have a package together. A lot of people don't understand that, but I now have a package together where I can change things. If you know how to control it, you can change things very fast. So I look at it as if I have the BPMS, but I don't have the BPM side, what I have is another COBOL engine. That's essentially it. It doesn't generate COBOL code, but it's essentially just a tech engine. Without the BPM side to put the models in place, define the rules, define the data use, and all that stuff, without that side, the BPMS doesn't give me much. So that's why I say I need the BPM side first so that I can start to put together the framework that will allow me to leverage the BPMS optimally.
Okay, we can give it just another minute for any more.
Yeah, other questions?
We've had several thank yous for presenting.
Well, you're welcome to all those people. I enjoy the discussions. I especially enjoy the questions. It's my way of interacting with people that I may never meet. Any other questions come in?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you all for spending the last hour with me, and hopefully it's been at least somewhat informative and helpful. The next webinar will be at a different, not on the third Wednesday of next month. Is it the fourth one, Lara?
I believe it is the 23rd, but I can actually tell you.
Okay. That webinar will be from a person from OMG who is on the committee that heads the standards for simulation. And for those who are still left on the line, simulation is becoming a recognized tool in the BPM space, simply because it allows you to control the iteration of your designs. Without simulation, each iteration of a design is a guess, thinking that, well, I hope this or I think this will make the last iteration better. And it's really, you know, you're looking at the models and the tools and stuff, and then you're doing essentially a desk walkthrough, seeing how you can then improve things. The simulation tools will tell you where the bottlenecks are. They'll tell you what happens under load. They'll tell you what happens in different situations and help you focus from iteration to iteration on those things that you want to change. And what that does is it significantly cuts down the number of iterations that you need, and it also proves the value of your design numerically, so that as you start to carry it forward, it's not a guess anymore. It's this is proven as to be optimal. And the discussion looking at resources and talking to your sponsors, talking to the managers becomes a very different discussion then, because it's not based on opinion, it's now based on provable fact. So next month we'll be talking to Dennis Kanye, Denis Kanye. I always mispronounce his name. About simulation and the new simulation guidelines that have come out.
And that will be on March 23rd, which is the fourth Wednesday.
So I would urge all of you to join the webinar, tell your friends, colleagues, and because I do think that it's something that you're all going to run into sooner than later. With that, thank you all again. I've enjoyed the opportunity to spend the hour with you, and hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.